Hey guys, tonight we step back into a world where time is softer, shadows are longer, and the cold isn't just a climate, it's a character. You're not sitting on your memory foam mattress anymore. You're lying in a timber longhouse, its roof blackened with decades of smoke, the walls pulsing with the muffled breath of a dozen other bodies. The air smells of firewood, sweat, animal hides, and something faintly fermented. Welcome to a Viking night. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, you won't need to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're listening from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the quiet, which isn't truly quiet at all. It's the hush of tired feet, the whisper of furs rustling, the rhythmic huff of animals tucked into the far side of the hall. Those goats are family too, by the way. They sleep where they live, and you'll be doing the same. The longhouse stretches out around you like the ribs of a great beast. Thick wooden beams rising above, charred and polished by smoke from 100 years of hearth fires. There's no chimney. The smoke curls up and filters out slowly through. The thatch above, hanging low in the rafters and turning every torch and ember into a gentle, golden glow. You lie in the communal sleeping space, a sunken stretch of earth covered in overlapping hides, sheepskins, stitched wool, and patches of straw stuffed into old sailcloth. There are no pillows, unless you count a bundled tunic or the curve of someone's shoulder. Beside you, someone shifts in their sleep and mutters in Old Norse, maybe a lullaby, maybe a curse. You can't quite tell. It doesn't matter. You're not alone. Viking families didn't sleep the way we do now. Boxed up in rooms with soundproofed walls and blackout curtains. They slept like they lived. Together, close, without boundaries. The longhouse was everything: bedroom, kitchen, dining hall, armory, maternity ward, morgue. And at night, it transformed into something older, almost sacred. The center of it all was the hearth, a long, open trench filled with crackling wood, glowing embers, and the occasional pop of sap that sends a tiny ember shooting skyward. It's warm, but not comfortably so. You're still cold beneath your layers, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you grateful for the weight of the cloak across your chest. But the fire is alive. It dances on your eyelids when you close them. You wonder how many ancestors fell asleep watching that same flickering rhythm. The longhouse sleeps in waves. There's no agreed bedtime, no universal lights out moment, just the slow settling of bodies and minds. Children curl against their mothers, elders lean into their memories, and the warriors, if they've come back from a raid, sleep hard and fast, clutching weapons under their cloaks like old friends. Privacy is a concept for the weak. You get used to the sound of someone relieving themselves in a wooden bucket a few feet away. You learn to distinguish the scent of birch smoke from that of unwashed wool. You ignore the scratch of lice and the snore that could fell an ox. In some households, a dog might sleep curled around your feet. In others, you might wake up with a chicken pecking near your ear, looking for spilled oats from the evening meal. Sleep here isn't clean or quiet, but it is communal. Woven into the rhythm of the house like thread through a loom. You pull your cloak tighter. It's heavy with salt from the sea air, stiff from use, but still carries the warmth of your back. If you're lucky, you've got a fur-lined tunic and a thick wool blanket made by your grandmother's mother's mother. If not, you make do with what you have, which might be a sack of barley or the corner of a tanned reindeer hide. There's a comfort to it, all a raw, unfiltered humanity that doesn't apologize for its closeness. When the wind howls outside, the longhouse becomes a womb, sheltering its people from storms, spirits, and solitude. And when the moonlight seeps in through the smoke hole, you can just make out the silhouette of carved gods perched on a central beam, tiny wooden figures with blank eyes. Watching, always watching. Sleep is survival here, but it's also ritual. You don't just collapse into it. You enter it like a ship leaving harbor. You check that the fire is fed, that the children are warm, that the weapons are within reach. If someone in your family is sick or pregnant, they get the warmest spot to the fire farthest from the draft. If a guest is staying, they get treated with the same respect, even if it means you're the one wedged against the damp wall with a straw mattress that's seen better centuries. There's a rhythm, an order, unspoken but firm. Everyone knows where they lie. Everyone knows when to be silent. Everyone knows not to mention the thing you saw in the woods just before dusk. Historians still argue whether Viking longhouses were truly as smoky and crowded as we imagine, or if that's just modern bias projected backward. Maybe some homes were cleaner, more spacious. Maybe elite families had private rooms, separated by woolen curtains or low wooden dividers. But the archaeological record bone beds, hearth layers, charred beams, suggests this much. People lived close, and they slept even closer. One quirky theory even suggests that Vikings sometimes slept upright, propped against their shields, especially during times of conflict or migration. Can't confirm, but it explains why your neck hurts. Tonight, though, you're flat on your back, listening to the breath of your cousin beside you and the soft crunch of mice in the grain sacks. You try not to think about the smell, or the lice, or the dream you had last night, one of those slippery, golden visions full of ravens and blood, and a woman with no face. You were warned not to eat dried mushrooms on an empty stomach. Too late. But as the fire dies down and your limbs grow heavy, you feel something else take over. Something older than sleep. Something colder than death, but warmer than life. You're slipping under, not into unconsciousness, but into something deeper. You wonder if this is what the gods feel when they rest between battles. Is there a word for this weight, this quiet? You close your eyes. You hear the creak of the beams as the house settles. Somewhere, a baby fusses, and a mother hums a lullaby so old it has no words. The goat stirs. The fire pops. A breeze snakes under the door and brushes your cheek like a ghost's fingertip. You're not afraid. Not here. Not now. You are wrapped in wool and memory, in family and firelight. And as your thoughts drift like smoke toward the roof, you dream of snow falling on a fjord of oars slicing cold water. Of a world both brutal and beautiful, where even sleep is something sacred. The fire never dies, not really. It may shrink to coals and sputtering embers in the coldest hours of the night, but it's never fully gone. You stir just enough to see it now. A long red line of warmth in the dark heart of the longhouse, casting a glow that shimmers like old bronze on the low rafters above. The air is thick with its breath wood smoke, laced with peat and ash, curling lazily up to mingle with dreams. You don't speak, no one does. The fire is both a warmth and a witness. Its presence is constant, humming with ancient energy, a silent keeper of stories and secrets. You lie there, half awake, half dreaming, tracing the orange reflections as they ripple across the curved shields hanging on the wall. The fire isn't just heat, it's the soul of the household, the center of life and sleep, the line between comfort and death. Because here, in a land where frost lingers at the edge of every breath, fire is what keeps you breathing. One careless night without tending the hearth, and you could wake to a house gripped by the frozen fingers of the north wind, your lips too cold to scream. You watch the quiet dance of the flames and realize something odd. It's not just keeping you warm, it's keeping you together. Vikings didn't sleep apart in little pockets of solitude. They clustered around the fire like spokes on a wheel. Young children, their limbs entangled like vine roots, closest to the glow. The elders, just beyond, wrapped in layers of wool. And memory, warriors farther still, resting lightly, hands curled near their blades. You shift and feel your own knife at your hip knot, out of fear, but habit. Even in slumber, the longhouse remains half aware. Someone always wakes to stir the coals, to listen for wolves, to murmur an old spell against Draugr slipping in through the cracks. The hearth becomes a kind of guardian, a glowing sentinel in the center of this wooden world. Your eyes flick toward the shadows dancing on the beams, and for a moment, you imagine you see something moving there, not someone, but something. Maybe just the smoke, maybe not. You remember what your uncle said before his last voyage. The fire can speak if you learn to listen. He was always strange that way, half scald, half seer. But he wasn't wrong. Because on nights like this, when the wind howls outside and the fire sighs like an old friend, you almost believe the flames were whispering. The Norse believed in spirits, in ancestors who lingered, in gods who could be anywhere, especially here, where firelight flickers on carved wooden idols resting on the hearth's edge. Little figures with empty eyes, worn smooth by years of prayers and passing hands. One of them topples slightly as someone stirs in sleep, and you wonder if that's a sign. You're not quite sure what kind. The fires, smoke, snakes around your head like incense, earthy and bitter, curling through your hair, your breath, your skin. It will linger in your tunic tomorrow, a scent that says, you belong to this house. And beneath that smoke is the endless low murmur of the hearth, a crackle, a hiss, a pop. It never fully stops. It becomes part of the lullaby. Some historians think Viking fires were kept going for months at a time, passed down from mother to daughter, flame to flame, like a sacred family heirloom. Others say that's just poetic nonsense, but deep down, you know better. This fire feels old. It carries the weight of generations. You can almost taste the soot of a century ago. Someone coughs. A baby whimpers. The wind picks up outside, rattling the wooden planks and howling through the sod roof like a hungry wolf. But in here, the fire wraps you in a cocoon of golden silence. You remember stories from the skalds, told during feasts, when the fire blazed twice this tall, stories of how the gods stole fire from the giants, how Loki tricked his way into warmth, how even the coldest hearts could be thawed by a shared flame. One tale claimed the fire was a dragon's breath, tamed by human hands. Another said it was a gift from the All-Father himself, kindled at the beginning of the world and hidden in every hearth. You never knew which stories were true, but in moments like this, with your face aglow and your toes just shy of frostbite, you're willing to believe any of them. And it's not just about warmth or stories. The fire is practical too. It's how meat stays edible, how water boils clean, how healing herbs are brewed in little iron pots that simmer all night long. Even the ashes have purpose, scattered on floors to soak up spills, mixed into poultices, rubbed into hair for ceremonial greasing. You watched your grandmother do that once, murmuring to herself as she dipped her fingers into ash and bare fat, her hands moving like she was tracing a rune in the air. She said the fire could protect you if you respected it, if you remembered to ask. Some families even believed in feeding the fire, tossing in bits of food, drops of ale, shavings of bone as offerings. You did it once after you saw something you shouldn't have in the forest. Something that didn't have eyes, but watched you anyway. That night, you dropped a coin into the coals and whispered a word you didn't understand. The fire flared, blue, just for a second. You never spoke of it again. But you slept soundly after that. Historians still argue whether such rituals were real practices or just later embellishments, filtered through Christian monks who didn't understand half of what they saw. But the presence of fire in burial sites, in runestones, in sagas, it's undeniable. There was no sleep without fire, no safety without its light. Even during raids, when warriors camped in the wild, they built small fires surrounded by stones, or shield walls to protect them from the cold and from whatever else might stalk the woods after dark. Fire was the first line of defense against nature, against spirits, against loneliness. You shift again, your body sinking into the makeshift bedding. The fire flickers low now, more glow than flame, casting longer shadows. They stretch across the faces around you, family, neighbors, maybe even a traveler passing through. You don't know all their names, but you know their shapes in sleep. The way Eric scratches his beard, the way little Freya curls her fingers when she dreams, the way your cousin Astrid breathes through her teeth like a warhorse. You've spent enough nights here to recognize them by firelight. You could draw them in ash with your eyes closed. You've learned their rhythms, the silent code of this place. You know who wakes to tend the fire without fail, who mumbles spells when the wind gets too loud, who sleeps with one arm always tensed. It's an unspoken bond, forged not with words, but with warmth as you drift closer to sleep again. The fire becomes a kind of pulse, steady, alive, humming in the belly of the longhouse. You wonder how it will look in the morning when the frost creeps back in and someone must coax it back to life. Probably your sister. She always rises first, poking at the embers with a stick like she's digging for treasure. And maybe she is, because inside that ash, beneath the charcoal bones, lies something sacred, a thread connecting this night to the last, this house to the land, these dreams to the ancestors who dreamed them first. And so you close your eyes again. The fire's last flickers, painting gentle patterns on the inside of your lids. You are warm, you are watched, you are woven into the heart of something larger. The fire never dies, it simply waits, a soft, glowing promise in the dark. You wake to the sound of breathing, not your own, but a dozen others, some deep and rhythmic, some interrupted by coughs or little murmurs, some so faint you wonder if the soul behind it is dreaming or simply remembering how to breathe. Still dark, the longhouse clinging to the quiet like a child clutches a blanket. The fire is nothing more than a pulse now, hidden beneath a crust of ash that glows faintly when someone stirs. And there, in the thick of this dim world, is where you notice it again, how very close everything is. You roll slightly to one side and bump into someone's leg. They grunt, shift, and turn away. It's not rude, it's just life. Bedsharing is part of the Viking code, whether you're nestled next to your kin, a guest, or someone you barely know but trust enough not to stab you. In your sleep, it's warm, practical, and very, very unmodern. Forget your personal space. That's a luxury for warmer climates and softer people. Here, in this smoky cocoon of timber and breath, you sleep how you must. Together, the beds, if you can call them that, aren't always what you'd imagine. Sometimes it's a shared wooden platform built along the side of the longhouse, piled with furs and rough-hewn wall blankets. Other times, it's a layer of straw and hides spread over packed earth. The privileged Futha Jarl, the Godi, maybe a battle-hardened shield maiden with more victories than teeth might, get a raised sleeping bench draped with reindeer hide or seal fur, soft enough to forget the world. But most people sleep on the same level, shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, their lives and dreams tangled in a living tapestry of human presence. And they don't just lie there. They sleep with their tools, their trinkets, their memories. That means axes, swords, knives tucked under cloaks. If it can be stolen, it sleeps with you. If it can protect you, even better. You've wrapped your fingers around your hilt in the middle of a dream before. Once, you even woke with your blade half-drawn, heart pounding, no enemy in sight but the echo of one in your sleep. You never told anyone. But your brother did the same a week later. That's just how it is. You shift again, and your elbow nudges, a haftwood, worn, smooth, familiar. Your cousin sleeps beside it, his mouth open slightly, beard twitching with each breath. He's wrapped around that axe like a lover, and you know if someone burst through that door right now, he'd be on his feet before the wind caught its breath. The longhouse is a barracks at night, a womb, a battlefield in waiting. You never truly let go, not all the way, because even in slumber, danger breathes nearby. Wolves, spirits, rivals, and so you sleep in layers, not just of wool, but of awareness, of readiness. The blade is your pillow, the shield, your nightstand. Welcome to Bedsharing Viking style. There's something oddly comforting about it, though. In a world where death is a companion and survival is a group project, the closeness of bodies becomes a language of its own. Children curl up against mothers who never quite stop keeping watch. Old men snore beside grandchildren who dream of longboats. Lovers whisper until sleep catches their words. Even those who do not speak share warmth. You once bedded down beside a traveller from the east, no common tongue between you, but your backs pressed together like two spoons in a clay pot, sharing heat, sharing trust. You never saw him again, but you remember that night more clearly than some of your battles. Some historians think Vikings rotated sleeping shifts, especially during wartime or when raids were expected. A kind of watchful rhythm where part of the household slept while others stayed alert. No hard evidence, but it makes sense. In the sagas, there are quiet mentions of warriors rousing each other by torchlight, of mothers passing the baby from one sleeper to another so someone could rest. There's no such thing as isolation here. Even privacy is a flexible idea. Sometimes, a couple might tug a fur across their heads for a whisper of seclusion. Sometimes, they don't bother. You learn to look away, to listen without hearing, to let people have their fragments of space without needing walls. There's a kind of intimacy to all this that goes beyond physical touch. It's the shared rhythm of bodies adjusting, of breaths rising and falling in a soft ocean of sleep. You've woken in the middle of the night and felt the house itself breathe. The creak of timber, the sigh of wind through the thatch, the heartbeat of footsteps outside fox or man, you never know. Once, you thought you heard the gods themselves speaking in the crackle of the fire. Maybe they were, Or maybe it was just your uncle's mead working its way through your bloodstream. Either way, you didn't sleep for an hour after that. You just lay still, your hand curled around your dagger, listening to the dark. You think of the stories again, the ones skalds tell over roast meat and foaming horns. The tale of the berserker who slept standing with his axe, never fully closing his eyes. The shield maiden who trained herself to dream with her hand always on her blade. The chieftain who kept a gold coin under his tongue every night to pay the ferryman if death took him in his sleep. Stories, maybe, but they shape the way you sleep. The way you hold your fear. The way you wrap yourself in fur and steel and pray quietly to gods you only half believe in. Because sleep is not just rest, it's a gamble, a bet that you'll wake again, that the house will still be standing, that the fire will still glow, that your blade won't be needed tonight. And yet, despite all the edges, there is tenderness here. The way someone adjusts your blanket when they think you're asleep. The way the eldest whispers charms against bad dreams into the smoke. The way the dog half-wolf really curls at your feet like a guardian spirit. There is love here, even if it smells like sweat and soot and old ale. You've watched your father snore beside a man he nearly killed a decade ago. You've seen your sister cradle a neighbor's child while her own slept elsewhere. You felt your mother's hand on your brow during a fever, cool and calloused, murmuring words older than memory. That is Viking bedsharing to Dot. And so you lie still now, surrounded by this soft chaos of sleeping warriors and whispered prayers, of blades and bare feet, of dreams and the slow, steady settling of the Longhouse into its midnight silence. You don't need walls, you don't need doors. You have closeness, you have warmth. You have the reassuring weight of a world that might be brutal but never lonely. You curl closer to your own blanket, your own blade, and you smile slightly in the dark. Because here, you sleep like a Viking, not alone, not defenseless, not disconnected, but part of something larger, something breathing, something alive. The surface beneath you itches slightly coursed straw pressed into uneven fabric. The stuffing of a makeshift mattress that crinkles and shifts with every subtle motion of your body. The scent rising from it is a mix of hay, dampness, and the faint sourness of long-sweated wool. Your cloak, heavy with days of wind and sea spray, is draped over your legs, and your head rests on a rolled-up tunic that still smells faintly of the tannin-soaked river you crossed last month. Sleep in the Viking world is not a delicate affair. There are no feather beds, no lavender spritz linens. Instead, there is function and the rawness of survival, and yet, in all that roughness, something strangely soothing. Your sleeping space is a patchwork of whatever can be found first stitched from wolf or bear. Strips of linen reworked from a sail that once carried warriors to battle. Sheep's wool matted and yellowed with age. It is imperfect, uneven, and utterly yours. You run your fingers across the fur nearest to you, thick and scratchy, likely from a lynx or even a dog, and feel its story lingering in each wiry strand. A hunter's arrow, a tanning rack, a grandmother's needle, a winter of shivering and sewing by firelight. Every layer in your bedding has a lineage, a use beyond comfort. A sealskin lining, for instance, doesn't just insulate, it keeps the damp from your bones when the longhouse floor gets muddy. The Vikings, ever the masters of adaptation, rarely used a material for just one purpose. That cloak you wrap around your chest at night. It might have doubled as a sail or a shroud, a tent flap or a fireproof shield. A singular object, many lives. The textiles, too, carry their own secrets. Coarse wool woven on a warp-weighted loom, by calloused hands, dyed in earthy browns or faded reds, edged with simple embroidery if someone had the time or skill. It isn't beautiful in the way you'd think, no silken sheen or intricate lace, but it has its own rugged dignity, shaped by necessity and tradition. Linen is rarer, a precious prize for underlayers, maybe even a nightshirt if you're fortunate or highborn. But most settle into layers of wool and hide, patched so many times that the original fabric is lost in a memory of repairs. You turn over slightly and wince as a straw stalk pokes your shoulder. Still, there's a warmth in it, a dry, comforting crackle, a sense of the earth beneath you, steady and reliable. If you're lucky, your mattress is stuffed with last season's barley chaff, stitched into a sack once used for storing smoked fish. If you're very lucky, someone thought to mix in dried herbs, sweet gale, mugwort, or thyme to ward off lice and offer the illusion of freshness. You inhale and catch a whisper of something woody and faintly bitter. Maybe it's just the old wooden floor. Maybe it's the ghosts of herbs long crushed. You're vaguely aware of the cold curling around the edges of your blanket, creeping like a cautious thief toward your neck and ankles. You tuck yourself tighter, pulling the fabric over your ears. Vikings weren't strangers to cold. They didn't fight it so much as learn to live alongside it. They built with it in mine double-layered clothing, overlapping planks, turf-insulated walls. But indoors still meant icy drafts and a floor that sucked the warmth from your body like a hungry mouth. You've seen frost patterns on the inside of the walls, delicate and sharp as runes. And yet, you've also seen people sleep peacefully, through nights so cold their breath turned to mist within seconds. They adapt. They bundle up in everything. They own shirts over tunics, cloaks over cloaks, hats indoors. A favorite fur becomes as treasured as any blade. You've heard of men sleeping in their mail, too paranoid or too exhausted to strip it off, though those stories often end with rust and regret. Even now, curled in your bedding, you feel the ache of hard travel in your hips and spine, but you let the discomfort settle into your bones like an old friend. You can almost hear the wool creaking under your weight, whispering tales of the days it spent on a sheep's back, braving rain and predators, sheared and spun by a woman with hands red from the cold. That woman might be your aunt, or a stranger from 2 valleys away. It doesn't matter. The fabric still wraps you, still remembers. Every stitch in this world matters. Even the lumpy seam pressing into your ribs speaks of someone's care, someone's attempt to turn raw nature into something human-shaped. And it's not just the textiles that shape your sleep, it's the smells, too. The Longhouse is a perfume of reality, smoked fish, damp leather, pine tar, sheep dung, boiled cabbage, and the comforting stink of people who have shared too much and washed too little. You wrinkle your nose and then breathe it in anyway, because somewhere beneath it all is the scent of fire, of warmth, of familiarity. This is your home, and homes are meant to be lived in, not polished. It isn't a temple. It's a breathing, sweating, dreaming body of wood and wool and shared breath. You think of the stories told here, the songs sung with cracked voices, the way a child's first laugh echoed through this very air. You could sleep in a palace and still feel colder than you do here. As you lie there, the flickering light from the fire plays across the woven slats of the roof, casting net-like shadows that twitch and stretch like lazy sea creatures above you. You remember that some people believed dreams could be caught in such patterns, that the gods spun fate through threads hung over sleeping minds. That spiders were not to be killed, for they carried messages from beyond. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the wind dies down and the silence presses close, you think you can hear those threads twanging like harpstrings, brushing against your thoughts. You wonder what dream is coming for you tonight. Will it be a memory, a warning, a nonsense vision of flying horses and upside-down fjords? You've had all of those before. You've woken up crying. You've woken up laughing. You've woken up unsure which world was more real. Historians still argue whether the Viking approach to bedding was purely practical or held ritual significance. There are sagas that speak of deathbeds, of specific furs used only in mourning, of bedding passed down like swords, carrying honor and history. There are even strange mentions of sleep mats woven with animal bones, or grave dirt-likely exaggerations, or poetic metaphor. But then again, who really knows? The Vikings didn't write much down. Their beds, like their beliefs, were often burned with them, and still we try to piece together the smell, the scratch, the hush of a Viking night from scraps of archaeology and fragments of story. You turn your head and see a pair of eyes blinking back at you, your younger sibling, half awake, half dreaming. You reach out and pull their blanket a little higher over their chest. An automatic gesture learned from a lifetime of sleeping so close you can hear each other's teeth grind. They mutter something, a nonsense word, then roll over and burrow deeper into the fur. It's a simple moment, but it carries a weight that no silk sheet could match. The act of keeping someone else warm, of making sure they sleep just a little deeper, a little longer, as your own eyelids grow heavy again. You shift slightly and feel the textures press against your skin-coursed wool on your cheek, rough straw. Beneath your hip, the warm softness of your cloak draped across your knees. You are encased not in comfort, but in care. The Viking bed may not be soft, but it is strong. It is made with hands that know the land, the sea, the thread, and the night. And as you drift downward, you feel yourself woven into that same tapestry, a living thread in the warm, rough weave of the Longhouse. The outside world is dark and cold and vast, but here, wrapped in the scratchy embrace of furs and straw and salt-soaked cloth, you sleep like a god who knows what it means to be human. Sleep, in the Viking world, is never simply the closing of eyes or the slackening of limbs. It is strategy, it is ritual, it is vigilance wrapped in wool. You lie still now, the familiar ache of your body beginning to soften under the weight of fatigue, but you know this rest is hard-earned, carefully rationed like salt in winter, and always touched by the awareness that peace is temporary. In this world, slumber must be negotiated with the demands of status, survival, and the pull of obligation. No one sleeps just for pleasure. You're not alone in this house, and your sleep is not your own. Who lies closest to the fire? Who drifts off first? Who keeps one eye half-lidded until the door creaks? This is not chance. It's a kind of unspoken choreography, a nightly rehearsal in trust and hierarchy. And, like everything else in your life, it follows its own harsh wisdom. You, younger and still lean with hunger and ambition, sleep closer to the outer wall. Your breath fogs near the draft that slips through the edges of the timber, cold fingers tracing the creases of your cloak. Meanwhile, the elder grey, sunburnt, knife-scarred, rests closer to the hearth, one hand gently cradling a drinking horn he forgot to return to the bench. He earned that warmth through blood and battle and a dozen winters you've yet to survive. The newborn, swaddled in a cocoon of wool and hopes, sleeps directly against the mother's chest. A small heartbeat nestled beneath a larger one, Positioning isn't arbitrary. It's ancient, taught in silence, reinforced every night. Even without walls, there are boundaries. You remember once being allowed to sleep beside your uncle's boots after he returned from a raider. Small honor. Maybe, but in that moment, it felt as though you'd been handed a throne. He slept with his axe cradled in his arm and a dried bloodstain still crusting his tunic. You didn't sleep much that night. You watched the fire dance across the runes tattooed on his forearm, half afraid they'd whisper to you in your dreams. But you learned how warriors sleep light, with their ears tuned to footsteps, how they position their weapons within reach, but never under their backs, lest they grow stiff and slow to rise. Learned how they watch the shadows near the door, as if memory lives there. Learned how sleep can be armor if worn right. And you learned that slumber itself could be divided not into minutes or hours, but into watches and warnings. Who sleeps? First, who sleeps second? Who pretends to sleep, but keeps one eye open to guard the family while the night shifts and prowls? Your people don't just fall into sleep. They approach it like a shore, knowing there may be rocks beneath the water. There are rules. Two, if not spoken, then deeply embedded. If someone wakes with a gasp, thrashing from a nightmare, you do not laugh. Dreams are taken seriously here. They might be nothing. They might be omens. And in either case, you do not mock the soul still tangled in the web of sleep's strange language. You offer water. You murmur something comforting or old, a fragment of a song, a charm passed down from grandmothers with fingers worn from spinning. There are charms for peaceful rest, for protection from night spirits, for keeping your breath in your body. Some warriors whisper prayers to Odin or Tyr before sleeping, especially before battle. Others, like your cousin who swears by the old woods and their shadows, tuck small talismans beneath their fir twigs shaped like runes, beads blessed by a wandering seer, even bones, smooth from handling. Not everyone believes, but no one. Risks ignoring. You turn onto your side now, adjusting the fabric at your throat, feeling the edge of your blade against your thigh. It's comforting, oddly, cold but present, part of the sleep plan. A Viking without a weapon at arm's length might as well be naked. You've heard stories real or embroidered of raiders bursting into longhouses at dawn, catching whole households unarmed in their slumber. After those tales, you kept your axe under your bedding for a week, even though it bruised your ribs. Eventually, you learned to slide it just beneath the edge of the fur, wrapped in leather to dull its bite. Still reachable, still silent. Like you, historians sometimes debate whether Vikings really did sleep with weapons, or if that's just saga dramatics passed down by poets with a flair for the heroic. But the blades buried in graves, the careful placement of shields beside skeletons, even the heavy presence of weapons in domestic site-saw, whisper otherwise. It's not about expecting war every night. It's about being ready, always. Preparedness was a virtue. Sloppiness, a sign. Even in sleep, and then there are the sleepers themselves, each with their own rhythms. Your little sister hums in her sleep, a tune she never remembers by morning. The blacksmith's apprentice grinds his teeth like he's still shaping iron. In his dreams, the old woman near the hearth whispers names, some familiar, some forgotten, some perhaps not of this world. You don't interrupt. You don't wake. Because what someone says in sleep may belong to the gods. It may be a memory clawing its way out. Or it may be nothing more than the echo of too much mead. Still, you let it pass without judgment. That's part of the code too, There's no clock here, no bells to chime the hour. Time passes in firelight and silence, in the weight of limbs and the way your breath grows deeper. And yet you know when to rise, not just from instinct, but from the sleep planter, schedule of waking and resting etched into the longhouse through years of repetition. When you travel with a group, especially on a long sea voyage, that rhythm becomes sacred. Sleep becomes a shared contract. One sleeps while the other steers. One dreams while another watches for rocks. You've stood your watch before, shivering at the bow, while your shipmates snored beneath a tarp of wet wool and stars. You knew then that your stillness held their peace, that your tired eyes were their protection. And so now, when someone rouses themselves to tend the fire or check the latch on the door, you understand. It's not restlessness, it's duty. Even your dreams follow a kind of rhythm. They come in waves, sometimes short and frantic, like the ocean in a storm. Sometimes slow and deep, full of mountains and faces and halls lit with gold. You've had the same dream for 3 winters, now walking through a forest where every tree whispers your name. You haven't told anyone. Some dreams are private, but you've also dreamt of things that came true. The night before, the neighbors' cow died. You saw black birds circling in your sleep. That morning, you woke with a taste of iron in your mouth. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. Dreaming in this world isn't passive, it's active. A language the soul speaks when the body can't. You don't choose your dreams, but you do carry them. Some say the gods dream too, that Odin sleeps with. One eye open, seeing all, judging all. That Freya dreams of her fallen warriors, gathering them like flowers in her fields. That Loki dreams chaos into being. You wonder, sometimes, what the gods see when they close their eyes. Do they dream of you? Of this little longhouse tucked into the curve of a fjord, with its crooked beams and its patchwork blankets and its breath-fogged air? Do they listen to your whispered prayers and your muttered sleep sounds and find meaning in them? Or do they simply watch, amused? The fire shifts again. Someone adds a log, carefully, the embers sighing in response. Light returns, soft and golden, pushing back the deepest shadows. You blink, you stretch, you do not rise, not yet. But you feel the shift, the slow, gentle roll of night turning toward morning. You are still wrapped in wool and weapons, but the world has moved slightly. Your sleep is not over, but it has deepened. The house breathes with you, around you, for you. And in this shared breath, in this careful, vigilant slumber, you find your place. You are not just a sleeper in a bed. You are a guardian in the night. You are a memory waiting to wake. You are part of the Viking Sleep Code, where rest is sacred, and dreams might just be the beginning of something bigger. Somewhere deep in the middle of the night, you wake not abruptly, not in fear, but slowly, like the tide rolling back from the shore, leaving silence behind. Your eyes flutter open to the faint orange glow of the rekindled fire, low and steady, and for a moment, it feels like the world is suspended in amber. Around you, the longhouse sleeps on, some snoring, some murmuring, some utterly still, and yet, you are not alone in your wakefulness. This is the time between sleeps. The old ones call it the midnatter, the middle night, the hour of the hush, when the soul stirs before the body does. In the Viking world, people didn't sleep in one unbroken stretch. They lived by a rhythm as natural as the sea, one that scholars would later name Bephosic sleep, but which your ancestors knew, simply as life. First sleep comes quickly after nightfall, heavy and deep. wrapped in exhaustion from the day's labor or rowing or feasting. But then something stirs you, something quiet but insistent. The fire's sigh, the creak of the rafters, the pull of an unfinished dream, and you wake in the dark, not fully risen, but not fully gone. This hour belongs to neither sleep nor waking, but to something in between. You shift beneath your blanket and realize that you are not the only one who has awakened. A rustle near the hearth, a cough across the hall, the sound of someone relieving themselves in the slop bucket with a resigned grunt. These sounds would break the illusion of peace anywhere else, but not here. They're part of it. This is what night sounds like when it breathes. You remember being frightened by this hour as a child. You'd wake and think you were alone, abandoned while the world had moved on. But then you'd hear your mother's voice, soft and steady, reciting a line of poetry or muttering to the gods, and you'd know this was just the middle. The pause, the breath before the next dream. As you grew, you began to understand it wasn't wasted time. People used this hour. Some rose to stoke the fire or check the doors. Some prayed. Some made love. Others sat and reflected, hands clasped, watching the fire like it held all the answers they hadn't dared ask during the day. The hearth glows just enough to outline the faces of those who stir. Now your father, blinking slowly as he props himself on one elbow. The neighbor's boy scratching at a flea bite. Your cousin, who always rises to sip water and look into the dark like it's speaking to him. The air feels cooler now, the kind of cold that slips down your back even under layers, reminding you how thin the line between warmth and death really is. You pull your blanket tighter and press your cheek to the wool. The firelight flickers against the walls, and shadows shift like phantoms pretending to sleep. There's a kind of magic in this hour, a soft enchantment that hangs just beneath the surface of things. The sagas don't often speak of it directly, but the old tales do. The ones grandmothers whisper when the wind howls just right. They say dreams born in the space between sleeps carry messages, that the gods walk closer than, that spirits trapped between worlds sometimes drift through the longhouses, looking for warmth or memory. You once saw your grandfather rise during this hour and walk to the threshold, open the door just enough to let the wind speak, then sit silently beside the fire for a time. You asked him later what he'd heard. He only said, "She still sings." You didn't ask again. You don't always need to understand something for it to matter. In this strange hour, when the world is muted and minds are loose, you learn things about yourself, things about others. You remember the face of someone long dead. You realize the solution to a problem that's gnawed at you for days. You feel the ache of love for someone you've never told. You hear a song in your head that hasn't been sung in years. And then it all slips away like mist when the fire crackles louder and a rooster crows far off. Too eager, too early. The Vikings accepted this broken night as normal, even sacred. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep was universal, or only common in colder, rural places. Some claim the pattern emerged from necessity frost, making the longhouse too cold to sleep through, or chores dividing up the night silence. But if you ask anyone here, they'll tell you it's natural, just how the night works. Sleep, wake, sleep again. Two halves of one whole, like twin sails on a ship. The first sleep draws out your body's exhaustion, the second knits together your dreams. In between, you live. Maybe only a little. Maybe only enough to add a log to the fire or whisper a prayer. But it's a sliver of life nonetheless. you begin to crave it in time. The freedom of that hour where the rules loosen and time stretches. Sometimes, in this middle hour, someone tells a story, not loudly, just a murmur in the dark, words barely rising above the crackle of the embers. A memory, a half-joke, a tale of a dream they just had. You've heard things during this hour that were never said in daylight. Confessions, regrets, a song your aunt hasn't sung since your uncle died. You once heard a voice you didn't recognize, whispering a name no one in the house bore. You kept your eyes closed. It felt safer that way. But that's the nature of this time. It makes room for what's usually kept locked away. The mind is unguarded here, gentle, less afraid of its own weight. Maybe that's why dreams bloom like mushrooms after this hour. Loosened by firelight and shared breath, you lie there, now fully awake, though you haven't moved. The blanket is warm over you, and the wooden wall behind your back hums with the faint vibrations of the sleeping house. You listen to the rhythm. Someone breathes in, someone else exhales. A log shifts in the fire. A rat skitters across the rafters, bold in its nightly errands. The air smells of smoke, of wool, of human life lived close and long. It smells like time itself, like centuries sleeping around you. You remember the old tales that claimed a person's soul wandered during this hour, that it left the body drifting like steam, visiting ancestors, gathering strength for the next sleep. That's why you're not supposed to be startled awake. That's why you move slowly, so your soul can find its way back in peace. You don't laugh at this anymore, not after what happened last spring, when your cousin woke screaming and couldn't speak for days, when he said he saw himself lying on the roof, watching the fire from above. You believed him. You still do. Eventually, you feel sleep calling again, not as a weight this time, but as a tide returning. You shift just slightly, nestle deeper into your furs. Around you, others have already drifted back. The quiet deepens, the fire settles, and you let yourself go. Not because the night is done, but because the second sleep waits. It will be different, lighter, maybe, or stranger. You may dream of snow that sings, or of longboats gliding over grass, or of your grandmother's voice telling you a story she never told in waking life. Or maybe you'll dream of nothing at all. Just the warmth, just the hush, just the soft, unseen hand that rocks the longhouse gently back to rest. This is the sleep of those who live with the land, who understand its rhythms, who rise with the sun not because they must, but because the world whispers its time. And as your eyes close again, your last thought is not a word, not a fear, not a prayer, but a feeling. One of belonging, of being precisely where you are meant to be, in the middle of the night, between one sleep and the next. Sleep returns to you like a tide, slow and seamless, and you slip beneath it without struggle, drawn down into the hush of second slumber, as if the longhouse itself is cradling your spirit in a vast fur-lined palm. And in this place beyond the firelight and the woven shadows, the snores begin to rise, a nocturnal chorus that belongs to the bones of the house as much as its people. It's the music of the midnight hall, an unintentional lullaby of wheezes, hums, grunts, and rumbling sighs. You'd think it would disturb you, these wet, nasal trumpets and occasional sleepy murmurs, but in truth, it comforts you. Each note in this sleepy symphony reminds you that you are not alone, that you are wrapped in a living braid of breath and dreaming. Somewhere to your left, your uncle sounds like a bear choking on a barrel of mead. Across the hall, your sister exhales, in little puffs, like a horse trying to nudge away flies. And above you, in the rafters, the goats bleat softly in their sleep, shifting now and then with heavy, clumsy steps that make the timber creak above your head. The snore of the gods, they used to call it, half joking and half true, because even Thor himself, mighty Mead's willing, thunder-hearted Thor's said to have roared in his sleep, so loud the skies mistook it for war. And if the gods could snore like that, why not you? No one scolds a snorer in a Viking longhouse. It's part of the background, as natural as fire popping or furs rustling. Sometimes, if it gets loud enough, someone might nudge you with a boot, or roll you onto your side, but even that is done gently, as if disturbing a snore is almost as taboo as waking a dream. You've learned to identify people by their snores, the rasp of your grandfather, like wind through dry reeds, the wet bubbling rumble of the fisherman whose lungs have taken in more seawater than air, the faint whistling of your cousin whose nose was broken during a drunken arm wrestling match last spring. And the children, gods bless them, are silent as seeds, breathing in tiny, invisible gusts, faces smooth and pink as apple flesh. Even the dog has its own sleepy voice, a growling bark muffled by dreams of chasing sheep or maybe trolls. You once tried to stay awake just to listen to it all, to map the soundscape of slumber around you. But you never made it past the hour when the fire dipped lowest and the frost began to sketch crystals on the wooden beams. The snore song pulled you under like a tide, as it always does, weaving you into its rhythm whether you like it or not. Some claim that loud sleep is the mark of a clean conscience, that snorers rest easy because their days were spent with honest labor and no secret guilt. Others say it's just the mead and salted fish doing their part. Either way, it's common knowledge that a longhouse without snoring is a longhouse filled with ghosts. There's an old superstition passed down from the sagas, that if a house falls silent in the middle of the night, truly silent, not a snort or sigh to be heard, then something has gone terribly wrong, that the house breathes no longer, that death has stepped through the door and taken someone with it. You've never heard it yourself, that deathly silence, and you hope you never do, because the snores are life, imperfect, ridiculous, utterly human life. They're the sound of lungs, working, of warmth being shared, of dreams shifting shape beneath the fur, and occasionally they're just funny. You've heard your father emit a note so cartoonish it made the entire household break into muffled laughter, each person pretending to still be asleep while shoulders shook under blankets and eyes watered from the effort of staying silent. He pretended not to notice, of course, and you never spoke of it again. That, too, is part of the code. But snoring isn't just a punchline. It carries weight, like everything else in this layered life. You've heard tales of warriors whose snores frightened wolves away from the encampment. Others, whose sleep sounds were so rhythmic and deep, they were said to match the beat of Yggdrasil's roots stirring beneath the earth. That's likely nonsense, but it's beautiful nonsense, the kind that makes the long nights feel mythic, instead of merely cold. One scowled even composed a verse praising the battle rest of Bjorn the Mighty, whose snores shook the rafters and cracked a rafter beam. You don't believe it actually happened, but you also wouldn't be surprised if someone tried to prove it by snoring through a feast night, just to earn the name. Historians still argue whether Vikings respected sleep as much as the sagas suggest, or if their nocturnal lives were more chaotic and fragmented than poetic. Archaeological evidence suggests sleeping areas were informal, sometimes crowded beyond comfort, and yet the care taken with furs, the attention to shared space, and the sheer repetition of nighttime rituals points to a culture that understood the sanctity of sleep, noise and all. Modern minds crave silence to sleep, sterile and still and silent. But here it is the opposite. Here, the noise is the lullaby. It's the confirmation that the world is spinning just as it should. No alarms, no schedules, just the chorus of breath and muscle and memory relaxing into the dark. You once had a dream, during a particularly raucous night of communal sleep, that you were a treacle and rooted, surrounded by sleeping bears instead of people. Each bear snored a different pitch, and together they sang a song that echoed through the frost-bitten forest, warming the ice as it passed. When you woke, you swore the same melody was still ringing in the beams above you, the timbers humming with its echo. You told no one, of course. That kind of softness, that poetic nonsense, wasn't meant for daylight. But it stayed with you, still does. Maybe that's why you don't mind the snoring. Maybe you hear the song beneath the sound, the harmony of lives lived closely, of trust given freely, of nights shared in noise and quiet alike. Tonight, it rises again. You let yourself be carried by it. You match your breathing to the rhythm of the hall, adjusting without realizing it, your chest expanding and falling like a bellows in a forge. You are one more note in the music now. You've given in. Sleep folds over you like a cloak, and even though your ears still catch the growls, the whistles, the wet hiccups of slumbering neighbors, they become distant, cozy, blurred at the edges. You're floating again, this time in a dream where the Longhouse is a ship, gliding across snow instead of sea, powered not by sails, but by the breath of sleepers. You don't know where it's headed, but you don't mind. You're warm, you're safe, and you are part of the noise that keeps this place alive. You smile, even as the dream drags you deeper, knowing that somewhere nearby, your uncle is snoring like a thunder god with a cold, and that your brother will make a joke of it come morning. And even though you can't hear it, far off in the other room, the elderly woman whose hands made half the blankets in this house breathes out through her, knows in a soft wheeze that rises once, falls, and steadies. Her snore is gentle, like the wind curling through pine trees. You wouldn't trade it for silence if the gods offered you a bed in Valhalla. No, here in this noisy night, this vibrating temple of slumber, you find your peace. In the snore of the gods, you sleep like one. Sleep clutches you gently now, guiding you deeper through a landscape of murmurs and breath. And somewhere within the velvet folds of the second sleep, the dreams begin not like a film reel or a parade of images, but as sensations first. The weight of snow beneath your feet, the heat of blood in your palms, the rustle of raven wings above your head before you even see them. Viking dreams are rarely idle things. They arrive as messages, omens, puzzles sent by gods or ancestors, and you feel it as your mind drifts, that curious charge in the air, like standing too close to lightning, like a word on the tip of your tongue that someone else is whispering. From another world, you find yourself walking through a birch forest now, each tree pale and watching, the moonlight pooling round your boots like milk. And there perched silently on a broken branches a raven with no eyes, its beak opening, to speak not with sound, but with wind. It lifts one wing and you see a feather fall, slow as ash, and when you catch it in your hand, you wake just briefly, enough to feel your fingers clench around air. Dreams like that are not forgotten. You'll remember it by morning, scribble the image into the ash by the hearth. Try to interpret it by the weight in your chest and the looks your kin give you when you describe it. Because here, dreams are not fluff or fiction, they are signs. You're taught from childhood that the gods speak through symbols, that your soul travels while your body sleeps, and sometimes it returns with news from beyond the veil. Some dreams are small, born from a belly full of rotten fish or too much mead. But others, the ones that leave you breathless, trembling, or smiling with tears on your face, those matter. The people around you are dreaming too. You know it without seeing. The twitch of a hand beneath the fur, the sudden gasp, the way someone mutters a name not spoken aloud in years. You've heard your father speak to his dead brother in his sleep, his voice broken and soft as river ice. Your grandmother used to wake from her dreams, clutching her braid, eyes wide, whispering prayers into her skirt. She said dreams came in layers, some from the head, some from the bones, and some from the gods. The last kind were the heaviest. You've carried one like that before. A dream of drowning, of a sea with no sky, of hands pulling you under, not in malice, but with sad necessity. When you told the village seer, she said it meant change, that something must be surrendered. And then your spear broke the next week and your dog ran off. Coincidence, maybe, but in your gut, you knew the dream had warned you. It said that Odin himself dreams in runes, that each symbol speaks a truth, and when he closes his one eye to sleep, he sees through all 9 realms at once. The wise men in your village say that if you dream the same dream 3 times, it must be acted upon, that to ignore it is to spit in the face of fate. And so people wake, speak their visions aloud, and let others help make sense of them. A man dreams of a woman in red, and the next day he avoids the marketplace. A child dreams of a burning tree, and her parents whisper to the blacksmith about new charms. Dreams are taken seriously, not just as superstition, but as practical reality. Why wouldn't they be? They've saved lives. There's a story about King Harold Fairhair, dreaming of a wolf made of ash that howled until stars fell from the sky. And the next week, 3 ships from the west raided his shore. He said he knew they were coming because of the dream. You've heard the same tale told about another king 100 years later, with different animals, but the lessons the same. Dream with one ear open. The Vikings believed in signs, not out of fear, but because they paid attention. The way a bird flies, the way a dog growls at nothing, the way you wake with your heart pounding and the shape of a tree etched into your mind. You once knew a man who dreamed of a silver fish, gleaming and silent. The next day, he fell from a ladder and broke his leg. Said he saw the same fish swimming through his vision right before he hit the ground. Historians might call it coincidence, folklore, but those who live close to wind and water learn to respect what visits them in sleep. It's not about being gullible, it's about being open. The Longhouse doesn't laugh at dreams, it listens. And when morning comes, the fire is not the first thing stirred. It's the memory of what you saw while your eyes were closed. Not all dreams are warnings. Some are gifts. You've had nights when you dreamed of fields blooming in winter, of laughter that came from no throat, of ancestors brushing your hair with hands made of smoke and wind. You woke feeling whole, like someone had stitched a piece of you back into place while you slept. The wise say that kind of dream is rare, that it heals in ways words cannot. There are people who wake from such visions and weep without shame, because they've been reminded of something so beautiful it hurts. A place they've never seen but ache for, a voice they forgot they missed. You once dreamed of a woman walking across a frozen lake with fire in her hands, and when you described it to your aunt, she said her mother saw the same thing before childbirth. And that night, she she went into labor and bore twins. Do you believe it? You do now. But dreams can deceive too. Not all visions are divine. Some are tricks of the mind, illusions cast by hunger or fear or fumes from the herbs burned in the smoke. There are tales of dream thieves, spirits that wear your own face in your sleep and plant false images in your head. Charms are kept near the bed for this reason. Raven feathers tied with red thread, bits of silver wrapped in wool, a rune carved into the bedposts. These protect not your body, but your mind as it travels. You've seen people wake and not speak for hours, their eyes hollow, their skin cold. Your father says that's a soul that wandered too far, that sometimes it takes a while to return. That's why no one wakes a sleeper too quickly. You call their name gently once, then again, letting their soul find the sound and follow it home. There is care in waking someone, a sacred act. You never yell, you never shake, not unless you want to lose them. Tonight, your own dream lingers stiller, feeling more than a vision. That raven without eyes, that branch snapping under your step, you wonder what it means. You'll tell someone in the morning, not everyone, just someone who will know how to listen. Maybe they'll say it's a sign, maybe they'll say it's just a shadow of something old. But even if no meaning comes, you'll remember it. Because dreams are part of this world just as much as snow and fire and the creaking of the beams. They are another kind of map, another way to sail across the vast unknown. And here, in this woven life, where every thread touches another, you do not dream alone. The house dreams with you. Its wood remembers the dreams of those who slept here before. Their breaths still echo in the walls. Their visions linger in the smoke. And as you turn in your sleep, seeking warmth, seeking rest, you feel the brush of something unseen, not frightening, but familiar. Like a thought just out of reach, like a name you used to know, like a raven feather falling through the dark. You don't reach for it, you let it land. You let the dream be what it is, sacred, strange, and yours. The Longhouse sleeps on, though it no longer feels like night so much as timelessness. A stretch of quiet hours where the air itself softens and thickens, filled with breath and warmth and memory. You stir slightly, adjusting your leg beneath the tangled layers of wool and fur, and in doing so, you feel again the shape of the world around you, feet against your calf, a hand close to your shoulder, the distant hum of a sleeper's signed, the unmistakable scent of straw, salt, an unwashed wool that clings to this shared human shelter like perfume does to linen. It is not a chamber of solitude. It is a hive, a gathering, a sacred tangle of life. Here, in the warm heart of the Longhouse, sleep is not just for the young or the strong or the chosen. It belongs to everyone. And so you look quietly, lazily, without turning your head, and you notice who sleeps beside you. Children, always closer to the fire, nestled into the crooks of elbows and the gaps between cloaks. They are tiny heat sources, bundled into woolen cocoons, their faces red and smooth, their breathing fast and shallow, as if their dreams are racing ahead of them. You smile because you remember being that small, tucking your toes into your mother's belly, pressing your cheek to the fur over her chest and listening not to her heartbeat, but to the song of it, the rhythm of her living. You remember being moved gently in sleep, arms scooping you up when you rolled too close to the fire or too far toward the cold wall, and never waking fully, just drifting upward into a lap or a shoulder as if the air itself carried you. Now it's your turn. You reach out and pull the blanket higher over your younger brother, whose leg has escaped the warmth and twitches like a fish out of water. He doesn't wake. He grunts softly and turns onto his side, pressing against you in that way only children do, trusting that you will be the barrier between him and the chill. And you are. Everyone here has a role in the great nightly ballet of warmth and breath. The elders, curled closest to the hearth, no longer needed for guarding but still necessary, for their heat and their knowledge. They sleep in bundles of furs, their snores deep and steady, the sound of earth remembering itself. Sometimes they whisper in their sleep, muttering to people long dead or to gods who haven't been worshipped in generations, and no one shushes them. The oldest man in your house bent, Eric, with a beard that touches his belly, and a blind eye that still seems to see too much, sleeps sitting up most nights, his back against a beam, a carved staff across his knees. He says he dreams better upright, because the dead visit more easily that way. You've never tested the theory, but you believe him. You believe in most things by firelight. And then there are the animals. Yes, you share your sleeping space with more than just humans. The goats huddle in a pen at the far end, near the door, their heat seeping through the wood like steam. Their breath clouds in the air, little puffs of fog rising from woolly lips as they chew silently or curl beside each other like sacks of moss. You've gotten used to the sound of their hooves on timber, to the soft bleat that comes now and then when one rolls too far in sleep or nudges its neighbor. The chickens are higher up, roosting on beams or perches hammered into the walls. Now and then one clucks in protest, flapping its wings before settling again. Their presence is practical eggs, meat, and warmth, but also oddly comforting. You once heard someone say that animals keep evil spirits away, not by magic, but by noise and smell and the sheer stubbornness of their sleep. You're inclined to agree. There's nothing quite so grounding as the flatulent sigh of a goat in the dark. Less charming are the slop buckets near the corner, hidden behind woven mats for the sake of dignity. No one likes them, but everyone uses them. It's better than venturing outside into the winter wind with only your shift and a candle stub. You learn to sleep through the sounds and smells, just as you learn to tune out the drip of rain through a leak or the creak of someone turning over on the bench. Sleep here isn't about silence, it's about surrender. Still, not everyone gets the same sleep. The mother with a newborn stirs more often, her ears sharp for the smallest whimper, her hands always reaching in the dark to soothe, to feed, to tuck. Her baby sleeps wrapped in swaddling beside her heart, lulled by its thrum, by the rhythm of milk and blood. Nearby, the crippled uncle who can no longer walk lies stiller than most, his legs twisted, his breath raspy, his dreams known only to him. Yet someone always tucks him in, makes sure his water horn is full, makes sure the firelight reaches his face. Sleep is not a privilege here, it's a right and a shared one. The boy whose father died last spring sleeps sandwiched between your aunt and cousin now, and no one speaks of it, but everyone knows. He started laughing again. That's how you know the sleep is working. Even grief must rest eventually. Even sorrow has a bed in this house. In the farthest corner, the part near the wall where the cold is sharpest and the smoke sometimes hangs low, there is a patch of straw you've always called the goat pea corner, because no matter how often it's cleaned or how thick the layer of rushes, it smells faintly of animal mischief. No one sleeps there by choice. It's a punishment, sometimes, or a sign you arrived too late to claim a better spot. You slept there once, after insulting the blacksmith's singing. You regretted it instantly, not because of the smell, but because of the solitude. Even a few feet from the circle of warmth, you felt the difference. You were cold in your skin. You were alone in your head. You understood, then, what it meant to be part of the Bradand, what it meant to be outside of it. Sleep here is not linear. It ripples, pulses, moves in waves. Someone always wakes. Someone always turns. A baby cries, a man mumbles, a goat kicks, and yet it continues. It adjusts. It breathes. You realize now that sleep in this world is not a solo act, but a chorus, a hive mind of dreams and snores and shared space. There's a reason the gods are said to visit people in their sleep, not because sleep is quiet, but because it is honest. No one lies in sleep. You are what you are. You drool, you dream, you twitch and mumble and reach out for warmth. And the Longhouse holds all of it, without judgment. It is not clean, it is not neat, but it is kind. You think of your little sister, sleeping with her doll clutched to her chest, and how she once said her doll whispered to her in the night. You believed her. Maybe the Longhouse whispered too, as the dark begins to thin just slightly. Just barely you realize you've stopped thinking and simply started existing, floating between thoughts and warmth, between the smell of wool and the faint click of embers settling. You are not fully asleep, not fully awake. You are part of the rhythm, of the breath, of the bodies curled and cradled around you. And in that half-dreaming place, where goat snores and human sighs blend into the hum of ancient timber, you understand something without needing words, that rest, real rest, is not the absence of sound or movement or even thought. It is belonging. And here, in this patchwork bed of straw and love and salted wool, you belong. Outside, the dark still clings to the world like wet wool, thick and breathless. But you feel it beginning to loosen, tugged slowly by the promise of morning beyond the timber walls, though no light yet leaks through the smoke hole above the hearth. Inside, the Longhouse is still a cradle of breath and warmth, the sleepers wrapped in their furs and their dreams, but the colder's pressing closer now, a sly and patient thing creeping in through every crack in the wood, curling along the floor like fog, finding its way beneath cloaks and into the hollows of knees and elbows and spines. You shift again and feel it, that ancient, silent enemy that steals into homes without a face or form, turning bones stiff and breath brittle. A Viking winter is not just a season, it is a trial, a relentless presence that tests not just strength, but spirit. You've lived through winters before, but this one feels longer, deeper, as if the snow outside has settled not just over the land, but over time itself. You lie there, eyes barely open, listening to the gentle crackle of the last ember in the hearth, and know that it is your turn to rise soon. Not because of duty, not because of some shouted order, but because the cold is a coland if the fire is not fed. If the Longhouse is not warmed, then the dark will take more than comfort. Winter sleep is strange here. It stretches across hours that feel like days, the sun barely lifting itself above the horizon before retreating again behind the hills. And you find yourself wondering if time itself has fallen asleep. There are days when the light lasts no longer than a blink, when the sky forgets to turn blue, and when your dreams stretch so long you forget if they were ever interrupted by waking. You once dreamed a full year within a single night of planting, of harvest, of storm and sun, and woke with your heart heavy, uncertain whether it was morning or still a deeper hour of night. And in these endless nights, the longhouse becomes more than a shelter. It becomes a world. You might not leave it for days. Everything slows. Everything thickens. The stories grow longer. The silences deeper. The bonds between sleepers stronger. You eat, you rest, you mend. You stir the fire and you sleep again. But not all sleep is gentle. Not all dreams are kind. In winter, sleep becomes something to be watched, managed, survived. Too much of it and your limbs go soft. Too little, and your mind frays. There are those who drift too deep and do not wake. You've seen it. You remember the year-old Ingrid passed in her sleep, her breath gone by morning, her body curled like a leaf beneath her blanket, eyes closed as if still dreaming of her younger days. They said it was peaceful, but you remember how the fire had burned too low that night, how no one had noticed, and so you've learnt to watch, to feel the shift in temperature before it becomes threat. The longhouse has its own breathing, its own pulse, and in winter you become its caretaker. You know which beams creak with the wind and which creak with rot. You know how many logs remain in the pile beside the hearth. You know how to listen for the cough that doesn't stop, the whisper that doesn't sound like a dream. You rise now, slowly, careful not to wake the boy pressed to your side, and swing your legs over the side of the straw bedding. The floor bites at your bare feet. You wrap your cloak tighter, pull your tunic down, and make your way to the hearth. The last ember blinks at you like a tired eye. You crouch, poke it gently, feed it dry twigs and breath, coax it like a wounded animal. There's an art to it, knowing when to blow, when to wait, when to let the ember remember its own heat. Soon the flame catches, dances, stretches up toward the blackened pot hanging from its iron hook. Light spills back into the house, soft and red and holy. You add a thicker log, hear it hiss, then sigh. The warmth comes slowly, reluctantly. You crouch beside it, not just to warm your fingers, but to watch it, to guard it. In winter, fire is a living thing. You must court it. You must love it. It is your only proof that life continues. Behind you, the sleepers shift. One murmurs, another sneezes. Someone draws their blanket higher. You glance back and see your cousins. Breath fogged the air in a tiny cloud, and you feel something swell in your chest, not pride, not fear, but that strange, quiet joy that comes from keeping others warm. In winter, that's the truest act of love, to tend the fire, to notice the draft, to rise first, to let others sleep while you kneel in the cold. You hear stories of other places, warmer lands where people sleep under open skies, where winter is a rain and not a threat. You cannot imagine it. Here, the cold sharpens everything. It tests you. It deepens your sleep and your hunger and your need to belong. You've seen the wind peel bark from trees, seen rivers freeze so thick the ice sings when walked on. You've heard the wolves howling in the black forest and felt your blood go still. But here, by the fire, you are safe. The longhouse protects its own, and you are part of that. The elders say that long winters breed long memories, that the dreams in winter carry more truth, more weight, that the veil between worlds grows thinner when the sun sleeps too long. You believe it, you've felt it. You've dreamed of voices that belong to no living tongue, of roads that don't exist, of being both hunter and prey at once. You've woken with tears on your face, laughter in your mouth, ice in your hair, and always, always, the fire waiting. For you, small and bright like a faithful dog, it forgives your fear. It welcomes you back. Sometimes You think the longhouse itself dreams in winter, its walls murmuring in sleep, its beams sighing as if they remember other winters, other nights like this, when other hands fed this same fire. You wonder if your great-grandfather sat where you sit now, eyes red from smoke, hands raw from cold, whispering to the flame as you do now, asking it to burn just a little longer, just a little warmer. You stretch your hands toward the flame and close your eyes, letting the heat bleed into your skin. The quiet around you is vast, but not empty. You can hear the world in it, the whisper of furs shifting, the creak of ice on the eaves, the slow drip of meltwater from a roof beam where someone plugged a hole with wool too late. It is the sound of life slowed to its barest hum. You breathe in, breathe out. The breath clouds, then fades, and for a moment you feel timeless, not just alive, but within life, part of the great rhythm that moves beneath frost and fire and flesh. You are the firekeeper, the watcher of dreams, the warmth that others will wake to. You look up through the smoke hole and see the stars sharp, silver, ancient. They look back at you, cold and brilliant, and do not blink. And still, you do not flinch. You are Viking. You were built for this night. Behind you, someone stirs, coughs, sits up. You do not turn. You do not need to. You know the rhythm. You know the shape of the next hour, the next breath. The house begins to rise, not in full, but in pieces. A foot against the floor, a hand reaching for a cup. A voice, husky and low, greeting the fire as if it were an old friend. You feel the heat now against your back, a soft nudge of morning before the sun. The winter is not over. It never really ends, but the sleep has held. The dreams have passed. The house breathes, and so do you. And somewhere, deep within the logs, a coal glows like a promise. That warmth endures. That light returns. That even in a world where nights stretch forever, someone will always wake first to tend the fire. Even as the fire glows low and the longhouse exhales its soft warmth, the cold remains an ever-present guest, a whispering reminder at the back of your neck that the line between comfort and frostbite is as thin as a thread of wool unraveling. In the dark, you stretch out a hand from beneath the covers, and it's like dipping your fingers into the mouth of a cave, cold, hollow, waiting. And yet, even in this near-frozen quiet, you are not afraid, because around you, beneath these stitched and patched layers of wool, fur, and hide, there is something far more enduring than the cold, the breath and body of others. It is strange to imagine, perhaps, that warmth can be shared so intimately that it begins to feel sacred. But here, in this closeness, in this human hive of sleep and shivers, body heat is more than survival, it is communion. You shift slightly, under the weight of your cloak, adjusting the place where your knees bump against someone else's back, and in that gentle collision of flesh and cloth and size, you understand something that no fire can teach you. To survive the night, you must touch and be touched. You must lean. You must allow yourself to be leaned upon. In a world where nights last half a day, and winter lasts half a year, no one gets through alone. You've heard the stories of frost curling over the toes of men who dared sleep apart, of wanderers found blue-lipped and stiff, clutching their own arms instead of reaching for the shoulder beside them. The cold is not just absence of warmth, it is presence of hunger. It waits, it watches, it slips beneath doors and through the fibers of cloaks like a thief with time on its side. And so you draw closer. The person to your left stirs, perhaps. in dream, and shifts their hip against yours, a silent acknowledgement of shared space. On your right, someone's breath grazes your shoulder with every exhale, steady and slow, the kind of rhythm only deep sleep can offer, the fur that covers. You all smells of animal and salt, of wind and wood smoke, of bodies layered through generations. This fur once lay on the back of a great bear, they say, or maybe it was a boar, or maybe it's been patched so many times with so many creatures that it now belongs to none and all. It's heavy, scratchy, a little damp along the edge, but it holds the heat like an old secret. You burrow deeper into it, into them, into us. For here, sleep is not a solo act. It is a collective effort, a choreography of limbs and lungs and shared breathing. There's a kind of intimacy in it that's difficult to explain to those who have only known walls and mattresses and personal bubbles. Here, boundaries dissolve. A child might sleep against a warrior's thigh. An elder might press their feet to your back for warmth, and no one says a word. You've woken with someone's hand curled around yours. Not in affection, but in instinct, their fingers seeking heat the way a seed seeks. Light? You've had to climb over a snoring cousin to relieve yourself at night, and return to find your place taken by a younger sibling who didn't even wake as they claimed your warmth, and you didn't mind. You simply curled around them, tucked your chin into their shoulder, and let the rhythm of breath carry you back under. In such closeness, there is no shame, only necessity. The body is not a thing to be hidden or protected from others, is part of the architecture of survival. Historians have sometimes tried to chart the Viking sleep arrangement like a map, assigning positions and customs, trying to define rules, in something that was more art than order. Yes, the weak and the small stay near the fire. Yes, the warriors sleep with blades at their sides. Yes, couples sleep together unless they've quarreled, in which case they sleep farther apart though. Not too far, lest someone think the rift is permanent. But beyond that, the arrangement changes nightly. A living puzzle dictated by tiredness and temperature and the pull of bodies toward one another. You've spent nights between strangers and never once felt unsafe. Because once the furs are drawn and the fire settles into its red glow, you are no longer strangers. You are kin of the night, members of the same fragile, flickering clan. Even if you speak no common tongue, even if you arrive with nothing but frostbitten fingers and a story you refuse to tell, you are welcome. You are given space, a corner, a share of the warmth. And in return, you give what you can your body. Heat, your silence, your trust. There's a story the elders tell about two enemies caught in a storm. Warriors who had fought each other for years, blood enemies, killers of kin. But when the snow fell hard and the wind howled louder than their hatred, they found themselves trapped in the same cave, alone. And so they huddled, back to back, unwilling. At first, then trembling, then pressed so tight against each other that they shared not just heat, but dreams. By morning, they were brothers. Or so the tale goes. You believe it, because you have felt it. That strange, quiet alchemy that turns proximity into peace. The way hatred cools when your life depends on the warmth of another's breath. The way silence speaks more clearly than anger ever could. Even now, lying as you are, swaddled in layers and pressed between other sleepers, you can feel that bond. No words are spoken, no eyes are open, but you know, with the certainty of breath, in your chest, that you are not alone. The longhouse holds you like a lung, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of its occupants, and the warmth's the shared, collective, utterly human. Warmth's what keeps it alive. The fire matters, yes, but it is nothing without the people, without the huddle, without the murmur of a dream, the twitch of a foot, the soft thud of a hand, adjusting a cloak in sleep. You think of those who sleep alone, outcasts, watchmen, wanderers who choose the stars over the roof. You envy them sometimes, their quiet, their space, their freedom, but not tonight. Not when the wind outside howls like Fenrir in chains, and the frost snaps at the edge of the door like a jealous god. Not when your own toes are tucked against the curve of another's knees, and your breath warms the back of someone's neck. You feel your body soften again, yielding to the pull of rest, and for a moment you imagine the heat between you all glowing like threads of gold, binding you together like stitches in a great fur-lined tapestry, a human quilt, a fire made of flesh. And it is in that thought, that image, that you begin to understand what it truly means to sleep like a Viking. It's not about stoicism or silence or braving the elements alone. It's not about proving your toughness or your solitude. It's about connection, about resilience born from shared vulnerability, about the quiet, beautiful truth that warmth comes, not just from fire, but from one another. You drift now, heavier, deeper, your mind slowing like a wheel, coasting to stillness. Around you, others breathe, others dream, others press close and forget, for a few precious hours, the weight of hunger or fear or memory. You forget too, you let go. You become part of the warmth, part of the weave, part of the long, living sigh of the sleeping hall. The fire hums quietly at the center of the longhouse, a soft heart pulsing in the belly of the sleeping beast, and around it, the warm-breathed, heavy-limbed hush continues comforting, serene, but never fully safe. For though the fire crackles, and the bodies lie still, the Viking night is never without its shadows, and in the folds of sleep, where warmth keeps fear at bay, there are always thoughts that flicker like sparks in the back of your mind, from things that live beyond the light. You don't open your eyes, but you feel it, a tickle at the edge of your senses, not wind, not animal, not dream, just a knowing, because in this world, as old and wild as frostbitten bone, night doesn't only belong to sleepers and dreamers, belongs also to watchers and wanderers and beings too old to name. You shift under your furs, pull them a little higher over your shoulder, and remember what your grandmother whispered to you when you were small. When your foot brushed the threshold after dark, don't look out the door at night unless you're prepared to see who's looking back. It was a warning, not a tale. She meant the Draugr, the restless dead who rise from their burial mounds with eyes that gleam like coals, heavy with hate, full of cold. They are drawn to warmth, they say, to envy, to sleep they can no longer have. That's why the charms are tucked into the rafters, why the elders mumble over the fire after it's stirred, why someone always leaves a bowl of milk or a slice of bread by the door just in case the night has guests. You've never seen a Draugr, not with your eyes, but you've heard the stories, and you've felt the longhouse still itself after a sudden gust of wind, everyone instinctively holding their breath as if the very walls were listening. It happens when the flames flutter too quickly, when a dog growls at nothing, when the goats refuse to settle. The old people feel it first. They sit up straighter, their knotted fingers finding their charms, their eyes staring into places you cannot see. Your Gretuncle once said he watched a Draugr drift through the longhouse in the middle of the night, its feet not touching the floor, its mouth moving without sound. It paused over the youngest child and vanished. The boy fell ill the next day, his eyes glassy, his breath shallow, and no healer could say why. He lived, but he never spoke again. You believed the story even before you saw the mark burned into the beam beside where the boy had slept her, shaped like a crooked handprint scorched into wood that no fire had touched. That beam is still there, wrapped now in red wool and hung with sprigs of dried juniper and rowan berries. You sleep well beneath it. You think it listens. There are other things too, not all cruel, not all dark. Spirits that pass like smoke, like breath, like shadows that forget to disappear. The nightmare who presses upon your chest as you sleep and fills your lungs with stone. You've woken under her once, your eyes wide, your arms locked. The breath stuck inside you as though your ribs had turned to iron. Only when your sister stirred beside you and rolled over did it break the pressure lifted like fog, and you gasped like someone reborn. The series said, the Natmara only comes when your soul has wandered too far, that it rides you like a tired horse to the edge of waking and dares you not to fall. So now, each night, before you sleep, you tuck your thumbs into your fists and place your hands beneath your pillow. A simple charm, a small defense, and so far it has worked. But some in the Longhouse refuse to sleep, fully too frightened of what comes in the deep. They nod off in spurts, rising to walk the floor, to whisper to the fire, to touch the carved faces of the gods for reassurance. Not prayers, but exchanges. You keep watch, and I will believe. It's not fear that drives them, not really. It's respect, because the night, here, is sacred and wild and not entirely yours. Some spirits are friendly, or so the tales go. Little housefolk who tidy when no one looks. A knock at the beam that means someone has entered without opening the door. A strange dream that leads you to a misplaced tool or a hidden store of apples. One winter, the bread rose when the yeast had frozen solid, and the old woman who made it claimed the house itself had warmed the bowl. You don't laugh at that. You never would. Because sometimes, when everyone is asleep and you are lying still, warm and wary beneath your cloak, you hear soft sounds that do not belong to the sleepers. Footsteps that don't match the rhythm of anyone in your house. A whisper in a dialect that hasn't been spoken in generations. The crack of the floorboard where no one is standing, and you stay still. Not because you're afraid, but because you are listening. The gods, too, walk in the night, or so it's said. Odin in disguise, with his broad hat and his one gleaming eye, looking for wisdom or trouble, or perhaps both. Freya passing through in the shape of a cat or a wind gust, pausing at the side of sleeping women and listening to their dreams. Loki laughing in the corners, stealing warmth or swapping dreams just to see what chaos he can sow. Some believe that when you wake in the middle of the night and remember a thought you didn't know you had, that's a whisper left by a god. That strange idea, that sudden sorrow, that joy that brings tears for no reason. You once dreamed of fire dancing in the sky long before you ever saw the northern light sand. When you told your grandfather, he only nodded and said, "The gods like you." That is a dangerous thing. You never asked him what he meant. The Longhouse itself is not immune. It creaks and moans, not just with wind and settling, but with age, with memory. Every board has seen death and birth and song and blood. Every rafter holds whispers. The carved post at the head of the sleeping, airy etched with knots and beasts, and the faces of gods long since faded, was said to be made from the mast of a ship that never returned. They say it dreams, too. that if you press your ear against it, it will tell you secrets. You tried that once, when you were still small enough to believe that everything had a voice. All you heard was a faint humming like bees in winter, but that was enough. You never questioned its power again. Tonight, the night is deep. The wind outside is a low, continuous murmur, and the smoke drifts in perfect streams up through the thatch. No screams, no strange knocks, no eyes peering from the shadows, but still, you keep your charms close. Still, you whisper a small word to Thor under your breath, just in case. Still, you tuck your toes beneath your cousin's legs and let the warmth be your shield. Sleep returns slowly, not with ease, but with purpose. You let it come, let it settle over you like a thick cloak soaked in stories, and just before you go fully under, you feel it a brush against your cheek, a touch that is neither wind nor skin, and you do not open your eyes. You smile, because the night has many visitors, and not all of them mean harm. Some come only to see that you are safe, that you are warm, that the fire still burns, and the sleepers still breathe. And with that knowledge wrapped around you tighter than any fur, you drift into dreams once more, knowing that the night is not yours alone, but that it knows your name. And then there is the sea, the other bed of the Viking world, vast and bitter and shifting under moonlight, where the rhythm of sleep is dictated not by firelight or furs or the measured breathing of kin, but by waves that slap and hiss like 1,000 angry tongues against the hull. You lie now, not on packed earth beneath a timbered roof, but in a low-slung berth beneath a sail, the cold biting deeper here, more insistent, more personal. The ship groans beneath you, a beast of wet wood and iron nails, and every creak is a lullaby with teeth. Sleep aboard a longship is not a gift freely given. It is a prize earned only by exhaustion, and even then it is restless, broken, a kind of watery dozing wrapped in rope and salt. The sail above you flutters like the wings of some vast creature, casting shadows across the deck in rhythms that feel more like warnings than comfort. You nestle into your cloak, one hand tucked beneath your head, the other still loosely wrapped around the haft of your axe. The air is damp, always damp pure. Woolen tunic clings to your back with cold sweat, and your boots haven't been dry. In 3 days, the salt from the sea has crept into everything. Your lashes, your beard, your blanket, your thoughts. And still, you sleep, because you must. Because sleep on the water is not optional. It is survival. You've learned how to wedge yourself between sacks of grain and coiled rope to keep from rolling with the swell. How to close your eyes even as your stomach churns with the endless motion. How to breathe through your mouth too. Block the smell of bilge and damp wool and 30 unwashed men. You've even learned how to dream through it all. Strange dreams, fragmented and slippery, full of waves that open into mouths of stars that fall into your lap like burning coals, of voices shouting from beneath the water in tongues too old to name. You once dreamed you were rowing through fog that had no end, only to wake with your hands still gripping an invisible oar. Sleep on a ship is different, thinner, taut as sailcloth in wind. You dip beneath it, but never fully. You always leave. Something of yourself tethered to the waking world, a foot against the gunwale, a hand on the rope, an ear tuned to the call of your captain. Because danger does not sleep, and neither do waves. There's always someone awake. The steersman hunched like a carved gargoyle over the tiller. The lookout perched high despite the cold, blinking into the endless black. And even among the sleepers, one always stirs, eyes half open, listening. Trust on the sea is a different currency. You share everything's space, warmth, food, breath, and yet you are each alone, wrapped in your own cold bubble of bone and cloth and hope. There is no hearth here, no goat bleating in the corner, no dog pressed to your thigh. Only the hiss of sea spray, the slap of ropes, the groan of wood under tension, and yet you sleep. Not because it is soft, but because it is necessary. You sleep the way wolves sleep, one eye always half cracked, your body curled in readiness. Some men sleep in shifts, some curled like dogs near the prow, some sprawled as if the deck were a feather bed. You sleep where you fall, when you can, as best you can. One night, during a storm, you woke to find yourself half submerged in a puddle that had formed on the deck, your cloak soaked through, your fingers numb, your lips cracked from the salt. You simply rolled, squeezed the water from your tunic, and closed your eyes again. No one complained, no one commented. It is the sea's tax, and you pay it without question. You dream less vividly here. Or maybe you dream more, but forget everything. By sunrise, the sea takes your memories, too, leaching them from your skull like dye from wool. You remember arriving on the ship with a head full of faces and places, but after weeks at sea, they grow faint, washed out, replaced by the ever-changing horizon, the taste of brine, the sound of wood shifting beneath you in its slow, painful language. The gods of the sea are different, too, less forgiving, less bound by the familiar rules of hearth and hall. You do not light candles or murmur charms. You tie bits of bone to the mast. You carve runes into the deck when no one is watching. You pour the first sip of water overboard. You whisper apologies to the waves after vomiting, because you feel watched, always. There are stories of men dragged from their beds on ships by hands made of foam and shadow, of figures seen dancing on the distant wave crests, only to vanish the moment you blink, of ships that disappeared entirely, their sails seen later on the horizon with no men aboard. You've never seen such things, but you've heard the songs, you've met the survivors, you've seen the way old sailors wake, screaming, their eyes not truly seeing the world around them. Sleep on the sea carries a price. You sleep knowing you may wake in water, that the next moment may not be air, but brine, that the plank beneath you may break, or the sail may tear, or the gods may decide they've had enough of your voyage, but still you sleep, because to not sleep is to go mad, because even gods rest, because your muscles ache from rowing, your eyes burn from salt, your spirit trembles from days without land. So you sleep. You let the sea rock you like a cradle made by an unkind mother. You tuck your cloak tighter, shove your arm beneath your head, and find stillness in the motion. Your shipmates lie near snoring, muttering, one singing softly in his dream, a lullaby his mother sang to him beneath a thatched roof far from here. You smile, because you know that song. You know that roof. You know what it is to be held by a house, and then by a ship, and then by nothing but sleep. And in this drifting, this rocking, this rolling tide of exhaustion and surrender, you find something that almost feels like peace. A peace not of comfort, but of surrender, of letting go, of knowing you are small and cold and soaked, but you are not alone. You are never alone. Not here, not with the sea beneath you and the stars above, and your brothers breathing near, and so, with the waves slapping beneath you, and the ropes creaking above you, and the cold pressing against your face like a kiss, you let yourself slip again just for a little while, into that place where time stutters and the sea forgets to pull you down. And in that space, In that precious moment before true sleep, you whisper to yourself the old sailor's prayer. Let me sleep, but let me wake. Let me sink, but not too deep. Let the sea hold me, not claim me. Let the gods dream with me, not of me, and then you go. Not with a sigh, not with a thought, but with a stillness as deep and wide as the sea itself. You wake with the dawn pressing somewhere behind your eyelids, not with the golden blaze of sunlight, but with a dull amber glow leaking through the edges of the longhouse roof. A kind of hesitant light, filtered and muted through mist and woods, like the world itself is still trying to decide whether to get out of bed. Your mouth is dry, your back stiff, your limbs heavy with the weight of dreams you don't quite remember. Only fragments remain. The sound of a far-off horn, the taste of honey and ash, the feeling of walking barefoot across ice that didn't crack around you. The longhouse stirs. Not all at once, not with any alarm, but like a great beast waking from a deep slumber. Slow stretches, low murmurs, the creaking of joints and floorboards, the tugging of blankets, the ritual rubbing of eyes that have seen too many winters. Someone coughs, someone else spits into the fire pit. There is a grunt of annoyance as a half-frozen boot is forced onto a foot that didn't ask for it. And then there is laughter, low, slow, the kind that bubbles up from the belly of someone who knows that. Yes, it's cold. Yes, they're sore. Yes, the world outside is grey and unforgiving. But also, yes, they are alive, and the mead from last night hasn't yet soured in the gut. You stretch your arms out beneath your fur, the bones in your shoulder crackling like thawing wood, and slowly the memories of the feast return, blurred but warm. The roasted boar, its skin blistered and crisp, the fat dripping into the fire, and sending up sparks like fireflies, the clanging of mugs, the pounding of fists against the table, the way your cousin sang a song so old even the elders forgot the verses, and everyone joined in anyway, slurring syllables into something that felt ancient and right. You remember the way the light shimmered on the inside of the drinking horn, the taste of honey mead so sweet it stuck to your teeth, the feel of arms slung round your shoulders in a way that said, "We've survived another season." That is cause enough to sing. Feasting is not just about food. It is ritual, remembrance, rebellion against the hunger that always waits outside the door. And when the eating ends, when the bones are tossed and the fire grows low, when the songs falter and voices fade, there comes that beautiful, ridiculous moment when no one knows whether to rise or lie down, so most simply do both. You laugh, you sigh, you slump. One person pulls a fur over their head. Another topples sideways and snores mid-sentence. No one says goodnight. No one needs to. Sleep after a feast is not a decision. It's an inevitability. You remember the way you collapsed onto the bench, the rough wood pressing into your hip, the softness of someone's leg beneath your head. Not a pillow. Just another sleeper, already gone into the rhythm of snore and dream. Around you, others did the same. Warriors curled up beside the table legs. Children tucked into spaces beneath benches. Someone used a shield as a mattress. Someone else snuggled up to a barrel of pickled herring, one arm draped around it like a beloved. Even the dog didn't bother finding his usual corner. He simply flopped onto his side near the coals and twitched his paws as if chasing something glorious in his sleep. And no one minded, because after a feast, the house becomes one body, one slow-moving, mead-drenched body whose limbs sprawl in every direction and whose heart thumps softly in the embers. You remember waking once in the middle of the night after a feast, mouth parched, head heavy, unsure whether you were still drunk or merely dreaming. You opened your eyes and saw nothing but shadows, heard only the soft sounds of breathing and the occasional shift of fabric against skin. And then there was the quietest of sounds, a hiccup, a tiny, almost apologetic sound, followed by muffled giggles, two lovers, wrapped beneath the same cloak, doing their best not to be caught. Not out of shame, but because it was funnier that way. You closed your eyes again, smiling. The Longhouse is generous. It holds joy and sorrow with equal ease. It accepts the stumblings of the heart alongside the stumblings of the feet. And after feasting, when the blood runs hot and the fire glows low, and the memory of laughter still lingers on your tongue, sleep comes like a tide, gentle, insistent, irresistible. There are those who believe the best dreams come after a feast, that the gods, drunk on offerings and smoke, lean closer to whisper secrets into the ears of the slumbering, that Odin may place a riddle in your dreams, or that Freya may bless you with a vision of love yet to come. You've had dreams like that. You've seen halls of gold lit by stars. You've run through forests made of fire. You've danced with people whose faces you cannot remember, only the sound of their laughter. And when you wake, the taste of those dreams clings to you, like spice, unidentifiable but undeniably there. You hold on to them as long as you can. Sometimes just a few minutes, sometimes for years. But not all dreams after a feast are sweet. Sometimes the meat was too rich. Sometimes the mead was too strong. Sometimes memory itself stirs up ghosts you thought long buried. You've seen warriors wake with a shout, eyes wide, sweat dripping from their brows despite the chill. You've seen the way they sit in the firelight afterward, rubbing their faces, not speaking. You've seen how their hands tremble as they sip water. Sleep after a feast is deep, but it is not always kind. It digs into the marrow. It unearths old wounds. But even then, there is comfort. There is always someone nearby to lean against, to murmur a word, to place another log on the fire without asking. In the Longhouse, no one sleeps alone, not truly, even in silence, even in pain. You are surrounded by the breathing warmth of others, and sometimes that is enough to soften even the hardest dream. By now, the Longhouse is fully stirring. The smell of wood smoke has brightened with the scent of porridge. Someone is cursing softly as they stub a toe against the bench. A baby cries. A door opens with a groan and the wind rushes in, hungry and sharp, reminding everyone that the outside world still exists. You stay beneath your blanket for a moment longer, soaking in the last warmth of shared sleep, the echo of the feast still humming in your blood. Your legs are stiff, your mouth tastes of mead and ash, your stomach is already growling, but you feel good, whole, held. You pull the furs aside and rise slowly, stretching like a cat, bones popping one by one. You look around and see the aftermath, people rubbing their faces, scratching their heads, pulling on boots, laughing at nothing. A man you barely know claps you on the shoulder and says something about your singing. You don't remember singing. He insists it was terrible. You grin. It probably was. It doesn't matter. Feasting binds people together, and the sleep that follows weaves them tighter still. You think of how many times your ancestors must have done this, raised cups, broke bread, stumbled into dreams beside kin and stranger alike. How many songs sung, how many stories told, how many nights like this in longhouses long crumbled into the earth. You are part of that chain, a living thread in a tapestry that stretches across centuries. And as you reach for a bowl of porridge, steam curling into your face, You whisper a small thanks, not to a god, not to anyone in particular, just to the night itself, to the sleep that held you, to the dreams that fed you, to the fire that waited. And you know, deep down, as you take your first bite and feel the warmth spread down into your belly, that you will sleep like this again, many more times, in many more places. The furs will change, the faces will change, the longhouse will one day become memory, but the sleep the shared, mead-soaked, dream-haunted, fire-warmed sleep of those who feast and fight and love and endure, that will remain, that will live forever. There is something different in the air, now undercurrent you can't name. A hush not of sleep but of change, and, as you sit with your back against the familiar timber post of the longhouse, sipping broth from a clay bowl that warms your palms and fogs your lashes, you feel it settle into the grain of your bones. The others are waking fully, moving with purpose rather than the gentle drift of dawn, and outside the low door, you can hear birds greeting the sky with soft, shrill chirps that weren't there last week. A frost still glimmers at the edge of the thatch roof, but it's thin now, like a veil the sun intends to lift soon. It is morning, yes, but more than that, it is the beginning of a different season. And seasons, like stories, like gods, change. Everything. You watch as someone hangs a fresh bunch of herbs near the hearth. Not the dried brown kind for burning, but green and sharp-scented. A promise of new life. You watch a boy sweep out the ashes with a care that suggests he knows this fire has seen more than he ever will. You hear a woman laughing outside, loudly, her voice clear in the wind, and you know, the old ways are fading. Not gone, not erased, but softened, like breath on glass, like dreams upon waking. You've heard the rumors, of course, that down south they pray to a single god with no face, that their houses are made of stone, that they bury their dead in silence instead of songs. And now, even here in the heart of the north, the whispers have turned to footsteps. Traders carry more than goods. Priests arrive not with spears but with books. And you're wrapped in your cloak, your mind still echoing with the fire-warmed songs of last night. Wonder what sleep will look like in the years to come. Will children still curl around their siblings by the hearth, the smoke-weaving dreams above them? Will warriors still tuck blades beneath their blankets, not out of fear, but tradition? Will the longhouse itself survive, or will it be replaced with walls that divide instead of gather, with windows that shut out the world instead of breathing it in? You watch the people you've known all your life move about the house, some older, slower, still strong as old trees, some younger, louder, already wearing shirts sewn in foreign styles, and you feel something in your chest tighten and release all at once. Time does not ask permission. It does not knock. It moves through your life the way the sea moves through harbors, roading, shaping, forgetting, returning, and you, like the rest, can only flow with it or be swept aside. But you also remember what the Skald once said years ago, during a winter when the snow buried the longhouse door and you feared the cold might outlive the flame. He said, "Everything worth keeping we carry in our sleep." And now you understand. Because it is in sleep, not in stone or scroll or rule, that the true heart of a people lives. You close your eyes for a moment, just long enough to feel the ghosts again, the sleepers of nights long past, the grandmothers who pulled you close, the cousins who laughed beneath shared blankets, the dogs who curled at your feet and guarded your breath. You feel them not as memories, but as presence, The Longhouse is quieter now. The people are fewer. The seasons pass faster, but the sleep remains. Maybe it will not always happen in rooms like this, with smoke in your hair and goats shifting in the rafters. Maybe the songs will change. Maybe the furs will be replaced with linen, the axes exchanged for words, the gods traded for another. But still, someone will rise in the night to feed the fire. Someone will reach for the warmth of a hand beside them. Someone will whisper to the dark, just in case something old still listens. Because sleep, real sleep, is never just about rest. It is about returning. It is about being held by something larger than yourself, by the breathing hush of those around you, by the memory of 100 winters survived, by the faith that come morning, the fire will still be there, crackling softly, ready to begin. Again, you rise now, slow and sure, the stiffness in your legs, reminding you of all the nights you've lived through. You fold your blanket neatly, place it on the bench, and run your hand once along the old carved post, feeling the groove where your brother once etched his name. Outside, the sky is wider than you remember, and the wind smells not of ice or death, but of rain. Change is coming. But for now, this moment, this breath, this room, this memory of 100 sleeps under one roof belongs to you. And as you step out into the morning, the last dream still clinging to your shoulders like mist, you smile. Because no matter what comes, you have known what it is to sleep like a Viking. To be wrapped in the arms of a home that sang through the cold, that dreamed through the dark, that held its people not with locks and keys, but with warmth. You have known the code, you have kept it, and wherever you sleep next, a part of it will sleep with you. And now, as the last images fade, of flickering firelight on timbered walls, of fur and frost, of the slow exhale of a longhouse at peacelet, yourself sink not into darkness, but into stillness, into the softness of knowing that somewhere, across centuries and snow-drifted fields, others have slept as you do now, wrapped not in silk or silence, but in closeness, in warmth, in the hush of a shared breath. You've walked through nights that were longer than memory, where fire was a prayer and sleep was a kind of trust, and you've learned that real rest doesn't come from solitude, but from being part of something ancient and kind. Let the cold outside drift farther away. Let the wind become a whisper. Let the rough scratch of wool against skin become nothing but texture in the distance. Your eyes are heavy now, not with fatigue, but with fullness. There is nothing more to see, nothing more to chase. You have eaten, you have dreamed, you have been held by the arms of sleep that stretch backward through blood and time, and now there is only the slow rhythm of your breath, the warmth on your cheek, the final flicker of thought giving way to silence. Rest easy, the fire is still burning. Rest easy, you are still home. Rest easy.